The story begins with Sang Yan, played by Bai Jingting, and Wen Yifan, played by Zhang Ruonan, who were once a couple in high school. However, after many years, they had no contact with each other. But unexpectedly, a few years later, they met each other again in a restaurant bar. However, when they saw each other again, Sang Yan seemed unable to recognize Wen Yifan in front of him. Watching Wen Yifan leave, Sang Yan was at a loss at this moment, seemingly truly not recognizing who he was. Afterwards, he went to his seat and told his friend what had just happened. Just as his friend was about to go up and check further at that moment, a waiter came over with a drink. Because he had just accidentally stained his clothes, the boss suggested giving him a drink as compensation. Wen Yifan looked at Sang Yan not far away, but did not accept this gesture, and directly asked the waiter to take 100 yuan back. Sang Yan, seeing the money, thought he did not accept his apology, but then the waiter told him that this was just a tip based on what he had just heard. This remark directly amused the staff, laughing at how a boss ended up paying out of pocket. Sang Yan, however, looked utterly disappointed, secretly watching Wen Yifan not far away. That day, they were supposed to go to the New Year's Eve live broadcast as a television station. Just as Wen Yifan happily followed her colleagues to the scene, she saw Sang Yan again through the car window. Afraid of being seen by him, she quickly curled up in the corner of the car. But things never went as she wished. Wen Yifan thought she would not run into Sang Yan again, but unexpectedly, while waiting in line for the restroom, she encountered him once more. However, at that moment, she suddenly received a text message from her friend, telling Wen Yifan that she had sent a mass message to Sang Yan before, and unexpectedly received a New Year's greeting from him today, thinking that contact method would no longer be in use. Upon hearing this news, Wen Yifan looked at Sang Yan in front of her, picked up her phone, and looked at it again and again. She seemed not to have received his greeting text. When she could not view his moments, she thought Sang Yan had deleted her. To confirm her judgment, she then sent blessing texts to other friends and also sent one to Sang Yan. Afterwards, she secretly watched Sang Yan's every move. To prevent him from discovering it was her, Wen Yifan even deliberately set her moments to private for him. At this moment, Sang Yan on the other side saw the blessing text she sent. Since he could not see her moments, he directly replied with a question mark. Seeing Sang Yan's reply, Wen Yifan was at a loss, not knowing what to respond, writing and deleting repeatedly. Finally, she also replied with a question mark plus a line saying, "Not happy," with an emoji, and then never received another text from Sang Yan. However, what Wen Yifan never expected was that, just as their television station finished the New Year's countdown live broadcast, and they were packing up to leave, due to the large crowd, she accidentally bumped into Sang Yan once more. At the moment they collided, Sang Yan only glanced at her and then turned away. Watching Sang Yan walk away, Wen Yifan's mind was filled with countless thoughts, but what she did not know was that Sang Yan had long recognized her. He just did not know where to begin. That day, because her previous residence had been harassed by the landlord, she could only look for help in finding a new place to live. Just as she finished viewing a place and was about to go back, her friend Ling Jai's boyfriend drove over to take them all out to eat. Wen Yifan could not resist their persuasion and had to get in the car with them. Unexpectedly, the friend driving suddenly said, "This is your first love. Fate is truly wonderful." Seeing Sang Yan appear before her, Wen Yifan was still somewhat at a loss. Soon they arrived at the restaurant for dinner. While in the restroom, Ling Jai looked at Wen Yifan's downcast expression beside her and seemed to notice something off about her mood. She deliberately reminded her that feelings should be seized early and not to regret only after truly losing them. However, just as she came out of the restroom, she encountered Sang Yan, who had just come out of the men's restroom. Sang Yan greeted her, and then remarked that only 2 days had passed since New Year's, and not seeing each other shouldn't feel like such an eternity. Then he turned and left. Wen Yifan chased after him, thinking Sang Yan had recognized her. Sang Yan said he had not seen her himself. It was his sister who saw her and told him, adding that Wen Yifan had been staring at him the whole time. Upon hearing this, Wen Yifan was stunned. She then began her counterattack, saying she had not noticed either, only that her colleagues told her his pants zipper was down. Hearing this, Sang Yan was mortified. Watching Sang Yan return, Wen Yifan felt very awkward and quickly used the excuse of needing to go back to work overtime to leave. Just as she was waiting, Sang Yan suddenly appeared behind her and deliberately asked where Su Heoran's car was parked, and whether she remembered where it was, asking her to take him to find it. After finding the car, since it was rush hour and taxis were hard to get, she had hoped Sang Yan would give her a ride, but he ruthlessly refused. She had to go back to the entrance and wait for a cab herself. Watching Wen Yifan walk away, Sang Yan, with his tough guy attitude, still could not get the words out. Just as Wen Yifan was anxiously waiting for a taxi, Sang Yan's car appeared in front of her. He still could not resist and offered to take Wen Yifan home. Wen Yifan then got into his car and said he could just drop her off at the nearest subway station. Sang Yan said nothing. To ease the awkward atmosphere, Wen Yifan made small talk from time to time. When she saw the subway station, she reminded him again. Stubborn Sang Yan ignored her and drove her directly to her building. Watching Wen Yifan leave, Sang Yan kept secretly watching her from behind, as if his eyes held endless reluctance and there were still some things left unsaid. At that moment, Wen Yifan also returned to her rental unit. Because the landlord had harassed her, he was taken to the police station. Unexpectedly, the landlord's family was already waiting for her at her home. Seeing that she was about to be harmed, Wen Yifan could only try to escape. But no matter how she fled, she was eventually cornered by 3 people in a dead end. At this critical moment, Sang Yan appeared just in time and quickly pulled her up. To keep Wen Yifan from getting hurt, he first sent her to the car and then fought the 3 others alone. It turned out that after seeing Wen Yifan home, Sang Yan had not left and had been staying near her place. Fortunately, he was there, so Wen Yifan was not injured, though he took quite a beating himself. After returning from the police station to help Wen Yifan leave as soon as possible, Sang Yan could only help her move overnight. Watching him injured because of her, all Wen Yifan could do now was buy him medicine to apply to the wounds on his face. Time passed until the next day, when Yifan had rented a new place. In the evening, she returned home and found her door was not closed. Thinking there might be a thief, she entered the room and saw a figure, scaring her so much that she quickly picked up her phone to call the police. But at that moment, a familiar person appeared. Both of them looked stunned. What was going on? Then, after returning to the room, Wen Yifan called Lin Jai to ask what exactly was going on and why she had rented the room to a man. On the other side, Sang Yan also called his friend to ask what was going on and how he ended up sharing a rental with a girl. Both of their friends had gone to great lengths for this pair of first loves. Seeing that things had already come to this, the two began to negotiate. Wen Yifan decided to find him a nearby hotel for the night, saying she could pay, and picked up her phone to start looking for nearby budget hotels. Unexpectedly, Sang Yan said he wanted to stay in a 5-star hotel, and that those budget hotels did not match his status. She had originally wanted Sang Yan to choose one himself, but to Wen Yifan's surprise, Sang Yan began to play dirty to get closer to her, saying his house had burned down and all his money was now tied up in renovations. Hearing this, Wen Yifan was utterly speechless and helplessly said that her schedule was irregular, and she often worked overtime, which might disturb his rest. Sang Yan said he hoped she would keep the noise down when coming back late. Wen Yifan sighed in despair while Sang Yan smiled triumphantly. Then Wen Yifan said she had a cat. Seeing Sang Yan not responding, she thought there was hope, so she quickly asked if he did not like cats. Upon hearing that he did not, she immediately beamed. Then it definitely would not work for them to live together. Just as she thought she had convinced him, Sang Yan dealt her a fatal blow, asking if she still thought he was still hung up on her. Seeing Wen Yifan not speaking, Sang Yan said that since his luggage was already moved in, he would move out after 3 months when the renovations on his house were done. Time quickly came to the next day, when Yifan went to see Ling Jai again and asked her what had happened last night. Ling Jai earnestly advised her that having a male roommate might not be a bad thing, and since they were both single, maybe things could even develop further. Seeing that she could not get through to Ling Jai, she had to go to work first. Her colleagues also knew that she had moved in with a male roommate the night before and asked about his character, suggesting that if he was decent, he could even serve as protection. Hearing what her colleagues said, when Yifan thought of Sang Yan protecting her in high school and the scene of him fighting off those thugs a few days ago to protect her, and her face flushed with shyness. She quickly explained that his character was indeed not bad. It was precisely because of what Ling Jai and her colleagues said that a certain foundation was built in her heart. That evening, after returning home, she waited for Sang Yan to come back and discuss the rent details and other requirements with him. Facing the fact that Wen Yifan would let him stay, Sang Yan unconditionally agreed to everything she said, no matter what. However, when it came to checking the rooms, he insisted on taking Wen Yifan's small room and giving her the larger room with the balcony and study, regardless of her objections, and directly moved her things over. In this way, Sang Yan successfully lived in the same house as Wen Yifan. To get closer to Wen Yifan, Sang Yan even bought her a cat tree. When Wen Yifan wondered why she had not bought it herself, he quickly walked over and lied without batting an eye, saying he bought it to qualify for a discount promotion. After saying that, he quickly pretended to be nonchalant and left. At that moment, Wen Yifan, inside the room, suddenly received a rent transfer from Sang Yan. After careful calculation, she transferred 520 yuan back to Sang Yan. Sang Yan, seeing the transfer of 520, was stunned. What was this? Why 520? After asking, he learned that she had overpaid the rent. Sang Yan asked Wen Yifan to recalculate. Wen Yifan, seeing the message, thought she had calculated correctly and began to recalculate. To her surprise, the result was 505 yuan, not 520. This left her utterly embarrassed. How could she have transferred 520? That afternoon, while resting at home, Wen Yifan suddenly received a call from Cairo, saying that their old classmate Xiang Lang had returned and could be her roommate. At that moment, Sang Yan, who was nearby, upon hearing that someone was coming to be Wen Yifan's roommate, instantly became alert. He stopped playing his game and focused entirely on listening to Wen Yifan's conversation. Upon hearing her tell the other person that she had already found a roommate, Sang Yan's expression relaxed considerably. However, then he heard that they were planning to have dinner together on Thursday, and Sang Yan's expression tightened again. After hearing Wen Yifan hang up, he pretended nothing was wrong and asked who she was going out with. Hearing it was an old classmate, he then asked if they had chosen a place to meet. When Wen Yifan said they had not, he eagerly recommended his own bar, saying there was space, and he could reserve it for them in advance, even offering a 10% discount. Wen Yifan's expression turned sour upon hearing the 10% discount, not expecting a boss to be so stingy. Time quickly came to the next day. While Wen Yifan was editing an interview video, her team leader suddenly came over, ostensibly offering to teach her how to edit, but his hand began to caress her back without permission. Seeing this, Wen Yifan quickly broke free. It turned out that when she worked at a newspaper before, due to her good looks, she was frequently harassed by her superiors and was even beaten as a mistress by her leader's wife. No matter how she explained, in the end, she was the one who got hurt. Time quickly came to the evening. A tired Wen Yifan returned home. Sang Yan, who was inside upon seeing her return, used the excuse that he was used to closing the door before sleeping to tell her to come home earlier. However, as they were talking, a man suddenly came out of the bathroom. He was Sang Yan's friend, Wen Yifan. Hearing this name and seeing the two stunned people in front of him, Wen Yifan suddenly remembered what Kyo had told her, that Wen Yifan had been very close to this Wen Yifan throughout 4 years of college. She immediately understood and said, "Never mind, you two continue, pretend I didn't see anything." Was this a misunderstanding? Sang Yan was even more devastated. The next day, Sang Yan saw Wen Yifan going out for a dinner date, and his jealousy flared up. He insisted on going with them to eat. Before Wen Yifan and the others could react, Sang Yan had already run to the car. To prevent Wen Yifan from spending too much time with Xiang Lang, he even sat directly in the passenger seat. This jealous display stunned the others. He claimed he did not like squeezing in with others. Wen Yifan was also dumbfounded. Sang Yan must have taken the wrong medicine today. However, in the car, when he saw the man using the rearview mirror to peek at Wen Yifan, Sang Yan unhesitatingly turned her toward himself. Xiang Lang said he could not see the road anymore. Sang Yan retorted, "Then you should watch the road." This remark made the atmosphere in the car incredibly awkward. During the meal, Sang Yan saw Xiang Lang hinting at his affection for Wen Yifan, and he was so angry he could have ground his teeth to dust. After dinner, they started playing a dice-guessing game for truth or dare. In the first round, Su Heian lost, and the punishment was to kiss someone present. Looking around, one was his good brother's secret crush, Wen Yifan, and the other was Kyo, who had caused an accident while drinking a few days earlier. To avoid being discovered, he could only seek help from Sang Yan, who was sitting across from him. Before Sang Yan could react, he kissed him directly. This move stunned everyone present. At this moment, Sang Yan, who had been kissed, was also devastated. The previous night there had been a misunderstanding, and today this happened. Now his preferences were even more confirmed. Afterwards, they continued playing the game. In the second round, it was Xiang Lang, who had just returned from abroad, who lost. He also chose truth. When Kyo across from him asked why he had applied to GU University, Xiang Lang looked at Wen Yifan across the table, implying that he and Wen Yifan had agreed to go together. At this, Sang Yan looked at him with intense jealousy, because at that moment he also learned why Wen Yifan had chosen to go to Yin University instead of the same school they had agreed upon. He could not believe it was all because of Xiang Lang. Perhaps there was more to the story. Seeing that Wen Yifan did not know how to play the game, Sang Yan could only think of a way to help her. Just as Wen Yifan was at a loss, he exposed himself first. This sudden self-exposure stunned everyone. Facing the punishment, Sang Yan unhesitatingly chose truth. However, to his surprise, the truth question was to name the most recent city he had flown to. Sang Yan, looking at Wen Yifan across from him, did not hesitate at all and said, "Yif." Hearing this name, Xiang Lang was stunned. And Wen Yifan was also somewhat at a loss because she was in that very Yif. But what Wen Yifan did not know was that Sang Yan had secretly gone to Yif to see her every time. And Wen Yifan had no idea that the truth or dare game just now was deliberately self-exposed by Sang Yan simply because he did not want to see her embarrassed. In the following days, Sang Yan found various excuses not to return to the house they shared. At first, Wen Yifan did not understand why, thinking he was working overtime. But she did not know that this was Sang Yan's way of avoiding things, and also his stubbornness. He did not want to lose this time, and he did not want to be the one dumped again. Thus, for several days in a row, they were each busy with their own lives. In the evenings, when Wen Yifan came home, she would only receive messages from Sang Yan saying he was not coming back. Even her friend Kyo could not stand it anymore, thinking she and Sang Yan had quarreled. However, unexpectedly, when Kyo was on the phone with Wen Yifan, Sang Yan happened to walk by and overheard. That evening, Wen Yifan returned home and saw Sang Yan's empty room across the hall, thinking he would not be back that night. But just then, Sang Yan suddenly appeared behind her. Seeing Sang Yan return, Wen Yifan was both happy and somewhat at a loss. Seeing the refrigerator filled with food and her expired coffee thrown away, and hearing Sang Yan tell her that since he would be away for a long time, he could help clear out her stock, Wen Yifan was still confused. She did not know what Sang Yan meant, and this was Sang Yan deliberately finding an excuse to care for her, yet stubbornly refusing to admit his affection for her. Time came to the day before the new year. Wen Yifan, upon receiving Sang Yan's message that he would not be home for the new year, volunteered to stay on duty at the television station. She planned to take some things to the security guard on duty, but then saw the guard picking up his wife and daughter to spend the new year together. This heartwarming scene moved Wen Yifan deeply. She also wanted to have such a scene. Returning to the rental unit and video chatting with her friend, she saw the happy family scene on the other side. At this moment, Wen Yifan felt somewhat lost. Why did everyone else have families reuniting while she was alone? Actually, it was not that she had no family, but during her high school years, Wen Yifan's father passed away unexpectedly. Her mother remarried for a better life and sent her to live with her grandmother. But within a year, her grandmother's health deteriorated, and she eventually had to live with her uncle's family. Living under someone else's roof left her with a deep shadow regarding family. Moreover, the daughter of the family her mother remarried into was not kind to her either. Watching everyone enjoy their reunion dinners, including the symbolic New Year's dumplings, Wen Yifan felt dazed. All of this was something she could never hope for. Just as she was lost in thought, the doorbell rang. It was Sang Yan, carrying a large amount of food, saying that there were too many relatives at his house and he had no place to stay, so he had to come back to the rental unit. Although Sang Yan seemed stubborn when cooking noodles. He deliberately added extra because he knew Wen Yifan had not eaten yet. When Sang Yan asked for her help, Wen Yifan did not refuse. In this way, with their cooperation, they also successfully had a meal together. Wen Yifan looked at Sang Yan across from her, and her heart felt warm. This was not only because she had eaten dumplings, but also because this was the only time in the past 8 years that she and Wen Yifan had eaten together. Time quickly came to the next day. Cairo brought Xiang Lang to her home to pay New Year's greetings. Since Sang Yan had gone home early in the morning, only Wen Yifan was home. While the two were wandering around the house, at that moment, Wen Yifan suddenly received a call from Sang Yan, telling her that he had left some porridge in the rice cooker for her to eat while it was hot. Unexpectedly at that moment, a man's voice was heard. Wen Yifan could only explain that Cairo had come to pay New Year's greetings, and Xiang Lang had also come. At this, Sang Yan suddenly felt uneasy, afraid that Xiang Lang might take Wen Yifan away. He did not care that his sister was at home and immediately rushed out. Meanwhile, on the other side, Wen Yifan spent the whole day out with Xiang Lang and the others. Just as they were seeing them off, Xiang Lang wanted to care for Wen Yifan and suggested they go out for something warm to eat. Hearing this, she remembered that Sang Yan had told her that morning that there was some porridge in the rice cooker. Ignoring Xiang Lang's insistence behind her, she quickly ran home. Just as she entered the kitchen to look for the porridge, Sang Yan suddenly appeared behind her. It turned out that when Sang Yan had returned at noon, Wen Yifan and the others had already left, and he had stayed home alone and drank the morning's porridge. However, at this moment, he stubbornly claimed he had bought too much. Facing the fact that Wen Yifan had brought friends home today without telling him, Sang Yan was furious and scolded her, saying that there should be equal terms and he would also bring people back. Hearing this, Wen Yifan was stunned, remembering what Sang Yan had told her a few days earlier. A few days ago, Wen Yifan had asked Sang Yan if he had a girlfriend, and if he did, he should let her know in advance about their cohabitation situation to avoid misunderstandings. Sang Yan had said no for now. However, to Wen Yifan's surprise, Sang Yan actually brought a woman home. The girl was actually Sang Yan's younger sister. To annoy Wen Yifan, Sang Yan even sent a message asking her to buy some pizza on her way home. Wen Yifan, not knowing the truth, thought Sang Yan had a romantic partner and felt a little sad inside. However, when she got home, she found it was his sister, Sang Zhai. Her face showed obvious embarrassment. She had been overthinking. Then she suddenly heard Sang Yan telling his sister to eat quickly and then do her homework. Hearing this, Wen Yifan thought it was because there were too many relatives at their house and it was too noisy. But the sister said there were not many relatives at home, only her parents. Hearing what the sister said, Sang Yan beside her seemed noticeably guilty. At this moment, Wen Yifan also remembered that on New Year's Eve, Sang Yan had told her he came back to the rental unit because there were too many relatives at home. However, just then, the sister suddenly brought up a matter, asking Wen Yifan if she had been in a relationship with her brother in high school. Hearing this, Sang Yan quickly pretended to cough to interrupt their conversation. It turned out that back in high school, Sang Yan had deliberately asked his sister to perform walking so that he could have a chance to get close to Wen Yifan. Hearing this, Wen Yifan also understood at this moment how Sang Yan had gone to such lengths to get close to her back then. While eating, the sister looked at her brother across from her, playing with his phone while occasionally glancing at Wen Yifan's room. And she also understood one thing. Her brother still liked Wen Yifan. He is just too stubborn to admit it. Time quickly came to the evening. Sang Yan had prepared dinner and called out loudly for everyone to eat, specifically so that Wen Yifan in the room could hear. But with his stubbornness, he absolutely could not bring himself to go to her room to call her. Faced with this situation, his sister directly scolded him, yet Sang Yan still seemed cold and aloof. Seeing there was no other way, his sister could only go into the room herself to find Wen Yifan. Under her constant pleading, Wen Yifan reluctantly came to the living room. While they were eating, Sang Yan's sister mentioned that she was torn between applying to Nanbird University or Yin University. Wen Yifan wanted to offer her perspective as someone who had been through it, explaining the pros and cons of both schools, but unexpectedly, the sister asked her why she had chosen Yin University. Wen Yifan was suddenly frozen. At this moment, Sang Yan across from her was also lost in thought. Sang Yan also wanted to know the reason. Faced with this question, Wen Yifan could only lie and awkwardly make up an excuse to brush it off. Hearing such an answer, Sang Yan clearly did not believe her. Soon they finished eating. Sang Yan took his sister to the downstairs of her apartment and then rushed back home as fast as he could. When he arrived home, he found that Wen Yifan had already gone to her room. To get her attention, he deliberately made some noise. Just then, fireworks and firecrackers suddenly sounded outside. The moment he opened the balcony door, he also saw Wen Yifan, who was in a bad mood, alone watching others set off fireworks. But she did not know that Wen Yifan was upset because she had gone to her mother's house. Before her father died, he had promised her that he would let her accompany her mother and be happy. But the reality was far from what she wished. After her mother remarried, the children of the new family did not welcome her. She could only come over when they were not home. Even the child born to her mother and stepfather did not know she had this sister. Her mother wanted to explain, but to Wen Yifan's surprise, her aunt was also there. The moment Wen Yifan saw her aunt, she was filled with fear. It was not the fear of being scared, but because her aunt's family favored sons over daughters. Even now, her cousin's wedding required her to contribute money. Hearing this, Wen Yifan was utterly furious. She did not want to have any more contact with them and said her final goodbyes. To make his secret crush happy, before she came home, he bought all the fireworks from the children at twice the price. But when Wen Yifan came back, he did not dare tell her the truth, saying he had bought too many on the last day of the new year. Wen Yifan took the fireworks from his hands. Watching the children playing happily, she remembered the time she set off fireworks with her father as a child. Sang Yan stood quietly quietly beside her the whole time, but he did not know how much pain Wen Yifan's life held. That evening, just after Sang Yan finished showering, he found Wen Yifan, who lived across the hall, suddenly walk out in her pajamas. Sang Yan thought Wen Yifan was seducing him, asking if her intentions were really that obvious. Watching Wen Yifan lean against him, Sang Yan was at a loss, not knowing what Wen Yifan meant by this. So he asked Wen Yifan what she meant, but before Sang Yan could react, Wen Yifan directly hugged him. This move once again left Sang Yan at a loss, thinking Wen Yifan was deliberately showing affection. But he did not know that because of the daytime visit to her mother and aunt, exhausted and weary, she had dreamed again of the terrifying nightmare, causing Wen Yifan to sleepwalk. In her dream, she actually saw a ray of sunlight. Because she had been walking through a dark forest, she suddenly felt a beam of light ahead, so she walked toward it and hugged it tightly to warm herself. But Sang Yan, still unaware, thought Wen Yifan was deliberately teasing him. After she returned to her room, thinking about what had just happened, Sang Yan could not sleep all night. He did not know what Wen Yifan's actions the night before meant. Meanwhile, Wen Yifan also did not remember the sleepwalking from the night before. She had slept very soundly. While washing up, she suddenly received a message from Sang Yan asking what she meant. Not understanding the situation, Wen Yifan thought it was because she had not stayed to finish setting off fireworks with him the night before, so she replied with a what? Seeing Wen Yifan's reply, Sang Yan, who had been tortured all night, was devastated and gave her a question mark along with a like. Wen Yifan, receiving the message, was also stunned. What did the like mean? Was it an early morning encouragement? When she came out after getting ready, she wanted to ask Sang Yan what the message meant, but was directly confronted. Sang Yan asked her what she meant. Did she want to pretend nothing had happened? Wen Yifan thought it was because she had not finished setting off fireworks with him the night before, so she apologized. Hearing this explanation, Sang Yan was utterly crushed, looking utterly defeated, and said, "Anyway, it's not a big deal, but I hope you can give an explanation if you do something like that again." One person was talking about the fireworks the night before, the other about the hug. The two were completely talking past each other. Time quickly came to the evening. To remind Wen Yifan of what happened the night before, while on the phone with a friend, he deliberately brought up what she had done to him, saying a woman hugged his friend, and the next day acted like nothing had happened. Such irresponsible behavior could even be reported to the police. Wen Yifan said a hug should not be that serious, right? Not understanding the situation, Wen Yifan continued to tell Sang Yan that if it happened during a romantic phase, the hug might mean the girl liked him. If not, it was more likely the girl was in a bad mood, so the hug meant nothing more than friendship. Hearing Wen Yifan's irresponsible reply and being told that his friend was just overthinking things, Sang Yan was absolutely furious. The next day, Wen Yifan's aunt came to the building where she worked and found Wen Yifan, ostensibly to apologize for what she had done at her mother's house last time. But as she spoke, she took out her phone to set Wen Yifan up on a blind date. Hearing this, Wen Yifan finally understood. Her aunt was trying to sell her off, using her dowry for her son. Faced with her aunt's venomous words, all the scenes from her high school days when she lived in her house came flooding back into her mind. Every instance of abuse, harsh words, and her things being given to her son filled her thoughts. Fortunately, with the help of her colleagues, Wen Yifan managed to escape. It was precisely this stimulation from her aunt that caused her sleepwalking symptoms to reappear that night. Sang Yan, still unaware of the truth, thought she had come out to see him and tried to greet her. But no matter how he called, Wen Yifan did not respond. He only saw her sitting on the sofa frantically rubbing her arm. This action also frightened Sang Yan. Before Sang Yan could understand what was happening, Wen Yifan silently returned to her room right in front of him. Time quickly came to the next day. Sang Yan woke up and saw Wen Yifan emerge, looking relaxed, asking him what time he had come back last night. She did not even know. Watching Wen Yifan leave, Sang Yan was even more puzzled. What was going on? That evening, when Wen Yifan returned home, she remembered what Cairo had said to her during the day. Cairo knew there was a misunderstanding between Wen Yifan and Sang Yan, and that an apology could resolve it. Cairo wanted Wen Yifan to apologize to Sang Yan, since it was she who had broken up with him in high school. Wen Yifan felt that so much time had passed, and an apology now would be useless. Cairo disagreed, believing that it was never too late to apologize as long as one wanted to. So when she saw Sang Yan, she thought she really should apologize. Just then, she noticed a show playing on TV. The two used the plot of the show to start a discussion, suggesting that the woman in the drama might have dissociative identity disorder. Sang Yan thought she was sleepwalking. It was also at this moment that Sang Yan learned from Wen Yifan that she also had sleepwalking. Hearing this, Sang Yan finally understood what had been happening on the nights he saw Wen Yifan come out. He then told her what he had seen the night before. Hearing this, Wen Yifan was stunned. How many times had this been? When she heard it was the second time she had sleepwalked, Wen Yifan was no longer calm. When she heard that she had suddenly run over and hugged Sang Yan, Wen Yifan was even more flustered, and her face turned red. To find out if she had really kissed him, Wen Yifan and Sang Yan decided to reenact the scene from that night. However, as they were replaying the scenario, to make it more realistic, Sang Yan lowered his head and moved closer to Wen Yifan's face. Seeing Sang Yan approaching, Wen Yifan became shy and quickly retreated to her room. To prevent herself from going out, she came up with an idea. Block her door. That would definitely work. However, to her surprise, even though the door was blocked when she sleepwalked that night, she opened it again. Sang Yan saw Wen Yifan having a sleepwalking episode. To prevent her from bumping into anything, he stayed behind her, blocking the corners. Just as he watched Wen Yifan sit down, Sang Sang Yan tried to call out softly. Unexpectedly at that moment, Wen Yifan suddenly stood up. Before Sang Yan could react, Wen Yifan gently kissed his lips. This kiss from Wen Yifan completely stunned Sang Yan, leaving him frozen in place. Watching Wen Yifan walk away, Sang Yan became anxious. "You kissed me and now you're leaving?" So he quickly ran in front of Wen Yifan. But Wen Yifan, still sleepwalking, was unaware of all this and silently returned to her room right in front of him. The next day, after waking up, Wen Yifan found that the door she had blocked with objects the night before was open. She realized that her sleepwalking episode had likely occurred again. Sang Yan, who was outside, pretended nothing was wrong and waited for her to have breakfast together. After coming out, seeing Sang Yan silent, Wen Yifan quickly asked if she had sleepwalked again the night before and why he had not woken her up. When he confirmed that she had indeed sleepwalked, Wen Yifan panicked and asked Sang Yan if she had done anything inappropriate. Hearing this, Sang Yan looked at Wen Yifan across from him with a flustered expression, then calmly said that she had not done what she did before, but she had done something even more excessive. Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan was at a complete loss and asked what she had done. At this moment, Sang Yan remembered the kiss from the night before. He decided, forget it, I really can't say it out loud. As Wen Yifan continued to ask what exactly she had done, Sang Yan forced himself to stay calm and said that he would make her pay him back for everything, one by one in the future. However, to Sang Yan's surprise, Wen Yifan thought he meant paying him money and even said she could write an IOU. Hearing this, Sang Yan was completely baffled. What do you take me for? What Wen Yifan did not know was that Sang Yan was already secretly overjoyed. That day, when it was time to pay the rent for their place, Wen Yifan received a reminder from the landlord. Since her salary had not been paid yet, she did not know what to do. Then she remembered Sang Yan had reminded her about the rent. Unexpectedly, instead of the 4,000 he owed, he directly transferred 40,000 to Wen Yifan. Seeing the 40,000, Wen Yifan felt something was off and asked Sang Yan how long he planned to stay, since this was too much to accept. Sang Yan simply replied, "Until you pay off what you owe me." Wen Yifan looked at his message. What did this mean? Time quickly came to the evening. To prevent anything else from happening with Sang Yan, she brought Cairo home, hoping that if she sleepwalked, Cairo would wake her up. Just then, she suddenly heard the door open. Wen Yifan thought Sang Yan had returned, but unexpectedly she saw a disheveled Duan Jiaxu. Before she could react, she saw Sang Yan also come out in disheveled clothes. The sight of the two standing together made Wen Yifan immediately think the wrong thing. She quickly said, "You two continue, I won't disturb you," and turned to leave. Time quickly came to the next morning. The four of them woke up staring at each other, all looking uneasy. Clearly, Cairo and Wen Yifan had both gotten the wrong idea about those two. That day, Sang Yan learned that Wen Yifan had gone on a business trip to Yif and wanted to call to check on her. Unexpectedly, just then, he heard a male voice on the other end of the line saying, "You say no, but your body says yes." To welcome Wen Yifan back, he did not hesitate to move up his friend Duan Jiaxu's return flight. This move left his friend feeling quite bitter. That day, while eating, Sang Yan saw that Wen Yifan was injured, so to prevent her from hurting herself further, he decided to close every door in the house that could be closed, except he left his own door open. That evening, Sang Yan was intently watching a horror movie. Unexpectedly, Wen Yifan, sitting behind him, took advantage of his distraction and turned off all the surrounding lights. This startled Sang Yan, and he asked, "Do we really need to save electricity that much?" Wen Yifan said, "Isn't this better for watching horror movies?" Sang Yan retorted that people who are scared like to turn off the lights to create atmosphere. At that moment, watching the terrifying scenes on TV, Sang Yan, who was actually afraid of horror movies, forced himself to remain calm. Just as he was about to reach the most frightening part, Wen Yifan, who was sitting at the table doing calculations, sent him the receipt for their supermarket purchases from that day. This message startled Sang Yan so much that he nearly threw his phone on the floor. Wen Yifan watched the horror movie calmly and smiled. This smile made Sang Yan even more uneasy. "Why are you smiling at a horror movie?" Wen Yifan calmly said. "The little ghost's face should be covered in flour. When they were filming, it was flaking off. Didn't you notice?" Sang Yan did not care about any of that. The horror movie had already scared him enough. It turned out that when they were in Bayou before, they had also watched this movie, but Sang Yan was too scared and fell asleep in the theater. Unexpectedly, at that moment, Wen Yifan walked over and pressed pause on the TV. The frozen image scared Sang Yan even more. Wen Yifan had paused it to check if the person she had seen that day was the same child actor who played the little ghost in this movie. After comparing, it was indeed him. Having confirmed her answer, Wen Yifan was about to go back to her room. Hearing this, Sang Yan was immediately unsettled. He said out loud that Wen Yifan was escaping because she was too scared to watch the horror movie, but in reality, he was the one who could not bear to continue watching. Seeing Wen Yifan about to go back to her room, he quickly called her back, patted the sofa, and told her to come over and keep him company. With no other choice, Wen Yifan had to sit back down and continue watching with him. At that moment, watching the images on TV and seeing how scared Sang Yan was beside her, Wen Yifan finally understood that when they watched horror movies together in Bayou, Sang Yan had chosen to sleep because he was scared. So she moved her body closer to Sang Yan. Sang Yan, seeing Wen Yifan move closer, was stunned. What was going on? When Wen Yifan said she might get scared later, the man's pride instantly kicked in, and he also moved closer to Wen Yifan. Sang Yan said, "It's okay, I'm here." Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan was even more amused. He was truly impressed. Sang Yan's stubbornness was stronger than a cooked duck's beak. That day, Sang Yan deliberately invited Wen Yifan to go grocery shopping together in order to get closer. Seeing that Wen Yifan also pushed a shopping cart, Sang Yan, taking advantage of her distraction, gave his own cart away and shared hers instead. As he watched her comparing prices on a product, he did not care and just threw it into the cart. Everything Wen Yifan touched, looked at, or deemed too expensive, he secretly put into the cart behind her back. When it came time to check out, watching Wen Yifan in front of him separating the items he had picked, he was furious. He grabbed everything and told the cashier to ring it all up together. This move left Wen Yifan somewhat stunned. They could just settle it back home. Since they had accidentally left their umbrella in the cart, while Sang Yan went back to retrieve it, a man appeared behind Wen Yifan with an umbrella. Seeing someone trying to steal her away, Wen Yifan did not hesitate to push the man aside. Seeing Sang Yan's actions, Wen Yifan's heart felt warm. What Sang Yan did not know was that while they were shopping in the supermarket, Wen Yifan had also been secretly observing his every move, her eyes filled with the sweetness of love. That day, Wen Yifan attended a new employee orientation party at a bar owned by Sang Yan and his friends. Just as she was admiring the bubbles floating outside, Sang Yan, who had just returned to the bar, also saw Wen Yifan playing with the bubbles above. However, to his great surprise, just as he was admiring Wen Yifan's goddess-like beauty, a rival appeared beside her. The moment Sang Yan saw someone approaching Wen Yifan, his gaze instantly hardened, as if he had a look of jealous rage. He then stood alone at the entrance, waiting for their party to end. He happened to see Wen Yifan helping the drunk rival. Sang Yan could tell at a glance that the man was faking his drunkenness. He pulled the man aside, put him in a car, and then had Wen Yifan sit in the passenger seat before quickly taking the man home. On their way back, Sang Yan said to Wen Yifan bluntly, "He wasn't drunk. Didn't you notice?" Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan, who was slightly tipsy, remembered their own past. Back then, Sang Yan had also pretended to be drunk to get closer to her, making her feel sorry for him and help him home. Soon, they arrived downstairs at their place. However, when the elevator doors opened, Sang Yan was utterly devastated. Wen Yifan, unsteady on her feet, was pulling at his clothes and even placing both hands on his chest. What did she mean by this? He directly asked her if she was confessing to him. A tipsy Wen Yifan waved her hand and said, "I don't have any plans to pursue you for now. I'll let you know when I do, okay?" Thus, they both went back to their own rooms. At this moment, a dizzy Wen Yifan looked at her cat and had a hallucination. How was she seeing Sang Yan again? Just then, Sang Yan came out after showering and saw Wen Yifan, thinking she was having another sleepwalking episode. Hearing Sang Yan call her from behind, Wen Yifan was startled. Hearing Sang Yan think she was sleepwalking, Wen Yifan remembered the scene from the day they broke up. Perhaps this was fate giving her a chance. She wanted to use this lie to do what she had always wanted to do back then. So Wen Yifan began to pretend she was sleepwalking and walked up to Sang Yan. Before he could react, Wen Yifan hugged him. This hug, 8 years in the making, brought back all the memories of their time together in high school, flashing through Wen Yifan's mind like a movie. At this moment, Sang Yan was also at a loss, both excited and guilty. Excited because he thought this was Wen Yifan subconsciously holding on to him during sleepwalking, and guilty because this hug was happening while Wen Yifan was sleepwalking. But Sang Yan, completely unaware, had no idea that Wen Yifan was not actually sleepwalking. The moment she returned to her room and closed the door, Wen Yifan was completely flushed. What had she just done? How could she have done that? Pretending to sleepwalk, hugging Sang Yan and taking advantage of him. Wen Yifan was utterly devastated. Alcohol really was the cause of all this. She would deal with it after she woke up. Time quickly came to the next day. After waking up and seeing Sang Yan waiting for her again, Wen Yifan was suddenly filled with shyness and could only pretend she did not know anything. Seeing Wen Yifan across from her not speaking, Sang Yan deliberately stood up and teased, "Is this your way of pursuing someone?" Then he asked if she had really been sleepwalking. Watching Wen Yifan act as if nothing had happened, Sang Yan slowly walked over to her, seeming to sense something, and asked why she was so quiet today. Wasn't she usually quite talkative? These words made Wen Yifan feel guilty and nervous. She grabbed her unfinished porridge and hurriedly slipped away. Watching Wen Yifan leave, Sang Yan's heart began to race. What did she mean by this? The next day, Mu Chengyu, who had been relentlessly pursuing Wen Yifan, came to their shared home. Upon hearing that Wen Yifan was looking for a new roommate, he ignored Sang Yan's presence and wandered around the rooms by himself, checking out the facilities. Before the two of them could even agree, he wanted to go into Sang Yan's room to see where he would be staying. Seeing this, the two refused his request in unison. Faced with this awkward scene, Wen Yifan could only tell Mu Chengyu that she already had a roommate and that he should be more mindful when staying at other people's places in the future. After finally getting rid of Mu Chengyu, Sang Yan asked Wen Yifan what she meant by inviting people to view the room, especially since he had already paid the rent. Faced with Sang Yan's question, Wen Yifan also had a hard time expressing herself. She was conflicted and did not want to rely too much on another person. Ever since her father passed away, her inner world had been closed off because she was afraid that one day the person she depended on would suddenly leave her, just like her father had passed away, or like her mother who had remarried and abandoned her. Time quickly came to the next day. The two met and exchanged greetings as usual, expressionless. But when Wen Yifan saw the breakfast Sang Yan had prepared for her, she wavered again. She had not yet made up her mind to accept another person's existence. She wanted everything to return to how it was in the beginning. Perhaps that would be the best arrangement. Because Wen Yifan had been falsely accused of being a mistress while at Yinhe Daily, the news spread to her company in Nanwu, and caused her to lose her qualification for an overseas assignment. When she heard people gossiping about her, she decided not to endure it anymore. She pushed open the office door and spoke her mind with conviction. As a media outlet that pursues the truth, they should not believe rumors and jump to conclusions based solely on one person's words, spreading gossip without investigating or verifying the facts. What would be the difference between that and a tabloid? That evening, Sang Yan's sister, Sang Zhai, suddenly came to find Wen Yifan. It turned out that because Sang Yan had learned that she had not filled in Narmo University as her college choice but had instead applied to Yin University, where Wen Yifan had once lived, he was angry and had not spoken to her. Just as they were about to continue talking, Sang Yan returned and interrupted their conversation. Afterwards, they went to the kitchen. At that moment, Sang Zhai suddenly asked Wen Yifan about her brother's first love. Hearing this question, Wen Yifan was somewhat at a loss. Then she learned from Sang Zhai that the reason her brother was so angry this time when he found out she had applied to Yin University was exactly the same as how he had reacted when his college entrance exam results came out that year. He locked himself in his room alone. It seemed that Yin University was an untouchable sore spot for him. Wen Yifan also understood at this moment that he did not hate Yif, but rather resented her for changing her university application after they had agreed on it. Thinking of all this, Wen Yifan could not help but cry and lay down on the floor, falling asleep. Later that night, because her emotions had fluctuated so much, Wen Yifan had another sleepwalking episode. This time, instead of going to her own room, she opened Sang Yan's door and lay down beside him. The next morning, Wen Yifan woke up and noticed something felt strange beside her. When she turned around, she was horrified. How was Sang Yan next to her? How did she end up in his room? Had she been sleepwalking again? She lifted the blanket to check if she had been taken advantage of, and luckily nothing had happened. To avoid being discovered, Wen Yifan carefully lifted Sang Yan's arm off her. Just as she was about to get up at that moment, Sang Yan hugged her. This scared her so much that she did not know what to do. Turning to look at Sang Yan's handsome face, she thought, I'd better leave quickly. However, just then Sang Yan spoke. Wen Yifan, seeing that Sang Yan was awake, was utterly devastated. She quickly explained, you're dreaming. Why don't you go back to sleep, and when you wake up you'll find it was just a dream. Without waiting for Sang Yan to react, Wen Yifan scrambled and ran back to her room. Luckily nothing had happened. She was really shaken, but Sang Yan was actually quite pleased. Soon, Wen Yifan packed her things and peeked out to see if Sang Yan was still there. Just as she was about to sneak away, Sang Yan, who was washing up, caught her. Seeing Sang Yan, Wen Yifan quickly said she would explain everything when she got back that night. Hearing this, Sang Yan put down his toothbrush, walked over to her, and directly said that he was worried that one day he would wake up and find that his innocence had been ruthlessly taken by her. This made Wen Yifan even more embarrassed. She said, just think of it as me sleepwalking, accidentally walking into the wrong room, finding your bed, taking a spot, and then accidentally falling asleep. I definitely did not have any physical contact. Seeing Sang Yan about to refute, Wen Yifan, feeling guilty, accused him of not sleeping still and said that when she was leaving, he had pulled her back. She said, just consider this as you making it up to me. Hearing this, Sang Yan was absolutely incredulous. You mean making it up to you? Are you referring to the last sleepwalking incident? Who exactly has feelings for whom? Wen Yifan did not know what to say anymore and quickly fled the scene. Time quickly came to the evening. She had wanted to see if Sang Yan was home, but instead, she saw him come out after showering without any clothes on. This scared Wen Yifan so much that she did not know what to do. Watching her panic, Sang Yan gave her a dismissive glance, then put on his clothes and said, anyway, I've accepted my fate now. You've kissed me, touched me, and even laid next to me. Whether I wear clothes or not doesn't make a difference anymore. Looking at Sang Yan across from her and hearing that he had been drinking, she became even more flustered, saying that what happened in the morning was indeed not her intention. It was all an accident, and she could not control the things she did while sleepwalking. Sang Yan said she was blushing. This remark made Wen Yifan even more flustered. Sang Yan still did not let her off and walked over to ask why she was blushing. Wen Yifan, already completely disarmed by Sang Yan's teasing, nervously said it might be because the weather was too hot, which was why she was blushing. Faced with this situation, Sang Yan pretended to be drunk and said, could you please keep some distance from other men? Don't go around being all charming on one side while making me the pitiful one who's at your mercy. Wen Yifan cautiously said, then let me pity you. After saying this, Wen Yifan shyly ran back to her room, leaving Sang Yan alone in the living room, stunned. At that moment, Wen Yifan remembered how her colleagues had touched her that day. She seemed to realize that she disliked physical contact from everyone, but did not feel repulsed by Sang Yan. In fact, she seemed to have feelings for him. Seeing the light suddenly come on in the living room, she also realized at that moment how much Sang Yan had quietly done for her behind the scenes. The next day, while cleaning, Wen Yifan watched Sang Yan sweeping not far away, and scenes from the past few days kept replaying in her mind. The time she pretended to sleepwalk and hugged Sang Yan, and the time Sang Yan had teased her. She thought it over. If Sang Yan truly felt disgusted by her, he should have distanced himself. But during their time together, he had shown no signs of disgust. Instead, he cared for her every day, whether it was accompanying her on the day her father passed away, or finding a suitable high place for her to practice martial arts when she had no place to train. But ultimately, she was the one who had hurt Sang Yan. At this moment, Wen Yifan thought that their reunion was merely a coincidence of fate. To avoid affecting Sang Yan any further, she steeled herself and told him that she would be moving out. She wanted to distance herself from him again to prevent causing him more harm. Sang Yan, hearing Wen Yifan's words from inside the room, felt an unspeakable sadness. Perhaps it really was time to let go. Time quickly came to the next day. To get away from Sang Yan as soon as possible, Wen Yifan brought Cairo along to look at apartments. Cairo could see her hesitation. On the surface, she was bargaining for Wen Yifan's rent, but in reality, she was giving her more time to think, to figure out what she truly wanted, and whether her relationship with Sang Yan was what she needed. Because one day when Cairo was sleeping with Wen Yifan, she woke up to find that Wen Yifan was no longer beside her. When she went to check Sang Yan's room, she was shocked. Cairo found Wen Yifan had sleepwalked again the night before and ended up sleeping in Sang Yan's room. What you think about during the day, you dream about at night. For this matter, they even made a special trip to the hospital. The doctor also suggested that if she had a roommate to share the place with, that would be better. If not, she really needed to be more careful. Hearing this advice, Cairo came up with an idea for her to find a romantic partner and casually chat with him, starting from topics like his zodiac sign and hobbies. However, the advice Cairo gave was for Wen Yifan, who had never formally been in a relationship. Talking to men was harder than climbing to the sky. That evening, after returning home, she found that she had unconsciously ordered an extra portion of takeout. Just as she was wondering why she had done that, at that moment, Sang Yan suddenly returned early from his business trip. Facing Sang Yan in front of her, Wen Yifan remembered the advice that Cairo had given her during the day. However, just as Wen Yifan was about to ask Sang Yan about his zodiac sign, she was suddenly interrupted by Sang Yan. Sang Yan said that his face was indeed the type that easily made people want to commit crimes, but they were all adults. Wen Yifan murmured, "I'm afraid I might commit a crime." Hearing Wen Yifan say such words, Sang Yan suddenly perked up, walked over to Wen Yifan and said softly, "Then go ahead." Wen Yifan immediately said that was not what she meant. Sang Yan retorted, "Then you don't dare." Facing Sang Yan's sudden questioning, Wen Yifan, whose heart was already racing, had to turn her head and look at Sang Yan, who was only a few centimeters away from her. At this moment she was at a loss and said, "Why would I go ahead?" Hearing Wen Yifan's reply, Sang Yan suddenly froze. He did not understand what Wen Yifan meant, so he asked if she still wanted to move out. Wen Yifan said, "If it's not causing you any trouble, I don't really want to move." Hearing Wen Yifan's reply, Sang Yan's lips curled up involuntarily, because he knew that his years of effort had finally paid off. Sang Yan also became shy. However, fate did not cooperate. The next weekend morning, Sang Yan's mother came over with a girl arranged for him to meet on a blind date. Seeing Wen Yifan in the house, Sang Yan's mother seemed to notice something, so she quickly pulled her son aside by the window to whisper and asked if he had feelings for Wen Yifan. If he really did, he should hurry up and pursue her. Unfortunately, at that moment, Wen Yifan, who was inside the house, did not hear the front part where his mother mentioned Wen Yifan's name, and mistakenly thought that Sang Yan was going to pursue the blind date girl. However, that evening when Sang Yan returned, she found that he had brought back a large amount of packaged food. It turned out that he had gone to dinner with his mother and the blind date girl, but had only packed the food to take back and did not stay to eat. Wen Yifan was also touched by Sang Yan's continuous efforts. That day was Wen Yifan's birthday. To give her a surprise, Sang Yan walked back and forth in the bedroom with a purchased gift, not knowing where to put it. He checked the washing machine but thought it was not secure enough. Then he went to the kitchen and even tried putting it in the dishwasher one by one. He finally hid it, and at that moment, Wen Yifan returned home from work. To prevent her from noticing, Sang Yan deliberately instructed Wen Yifan to get the cake he had already prepared from the refrigerator, then secretly followed behind her. Seeing that he was about to be discovered, he quickly jumped over the sofa and pretended to be indifferent while playing with his phone, but in reality, he was already extremely nervous. Soon, Wen Yifan brought the cake over. Seeing Sang Yan sitting on the sofa not speaking, she thought he was deliberately targeting her, so she made up an excuse to go back to her room. Just as Wen Yifan was about to walk past him, Sang Yan became anxious and quickly called out to her, asking her to come over and eat together. The moment Wen Yifan opened the cake, she finally understood. This was a birthday cake that Sang Yan had bought for her. Looking at this stubborn man in front of her, Wen Yifan understood in her heart that Sang Yan had always remembered her birthday. She then took out her phone to take a picture as a memento. For pursuing someone she had once hurt, Wen Yifan finally began to take the initiative. Using the excuse of having Sang Yan take a picture of the cake with his phone, she finally got the first photo of Sang Yan celebrating her birthday after 8 years apart, and this scene reminded her of the times when her parents celebrated her birthday when she was a child. Now, Wen Yifan's heart also had a warm side. Facing Wen Yifan, who had just made a wish, Sang Yan teasingly asked what wish she had made. Hearing Wen Yifan shyly say it was about work, Sang Yan said in a disappointed tone, "I thought you were going to say you wanted me to be your partner." Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan was at a loss and did not refuse. Her heart had already silently accepted the answer he had just asked. Afterwards, the two of them just sat on the sofa like that, looking at each other, each holding the other in their hearts, eating birthday cake. When giving her the birthday gift, Sang Yan even deliberately touched Wen Yifan's hair. Such an action gave Wen Yifan an inexplicable sense of fondness. After receiving the gift and returning to her room, when she opened the gift Sang Yan had given her, she found that the perfume he gave her was actually named Xiongjiang, the same as her nickname. At this moment, Wen Yifan remembered the first time she arrived at school in high school. It turned out that Sang Yan had always remembered her nickname and her birthday. Looking at the perfume in her hand and remembering how Sang Yan had touched her hair just now, Wen Yifan suddenly really wanted to be in a relationship. She wanted to pursue Sang Yan. Just as she was lost in her beautiful fantasies, her best friend Cairo called to wish her a happy birthday. So she quickly arranged to meet Cairo because she needed to figure something out. If she could not figure it out, she would not be able to sleep that night. When Cairo asked her what was going on, Wen Yifan said nervously and fearfully, "I want to pursue Sang Yan." Cairo, hearing that her lifelong single best friend wanted to pursue Sang Yan, was overjoyed and could not stop smiling. She never expected her best friend to finally wake up, so she came up with some ideas for her, telling her to take the initiative and strike decisively for a sure win. Soon, Wen Yifan returned home. Seeing that Sang Yan's light was still on, she knew he was not asleep yet, so she sent him a message. "When it's your birthday, I will give you a gift in return." She wanted to use this to create a bond with Sang Yan. Upon receiving a reply of "Oh," Wen Yifan was at a loss. What did this "oh" mean? Just as she was wondering, Sang Yan sent her another message telling her that his birthday was in 69 days. Hearing Sang Yan's reply, Wen Yifan was overjoyed and listened to it 3 or 4 times in a row. Then she shyly replied, asking Sang Yan to give her a countdown reminder of how many days were left until his birthday. Sang Yan, on the other side, said with his mouth that Wen Yifan should remember it herself, but in reality, he was already overjoyed. And Wen Yifan, seeing Sang Yan's reply, became even more certain of the answer in her heart. She said, "I will remember." People in love are like this. They want to be together with the other person every moment. Sang Yan had finally seen his dawn. Time quickly came to the next day. Because Sang Yan worked overtime and did not come home on time, he sent Wen Yifan a message to let her know he was safe, telling her to rest early and that he would be back later. At this moment, Wen Yifan, who was washing up, looked at the message in her hand and remembered what her best friend had told her the day before, to make the other person feel that she cared about him, to make him feel needed, like a spider web from which he could not escape. Thinking of this, Wen Yifan felt that she really should think of something, so she opened a social app and found a blogger who specialized in relationship advice, asking if there was any way to make the person she had hurt like her. At this moment, on the other side, Sang Yan had worked overtime until the early morning, but he still sent her a message reminding her that there were 68 days until his birthday. Wen Yifan, looking at the reminder message, thought to herself, wasn't he supposed to let her remember this birthday herself? Why was he still reminding her? Thinking that Sang Yan might reply, Wen Yifan could no longer fall asleep. She sat up and sat quietly by her dressing table, waiting. She picked up the books on the table and shuffled them back and forth, even started organizing her clothes. For people in love, waiting for the other person's reply is both sweet and anxious. She did not know when he would reply, constantly picking up her phone and looking at it again and again. Fortunately, persistence paid off. At this moment, Sang Yan finally replied to her message, telling Wen Yifan that she was too careless. What if she really forgot? Just like how she still owed him several meals. So Wen Yifan asked him what he wanted to eat. Sang Yan said, "I'm not that particular. The only advantages I had were already taken by you." Hearing Sang Yan's reply, Wen Yifan was very confused. At that moment, she remembered what Sang Yan had told her before, that when she was sleepwalking, she had kissed him, and when she was drunk, she had touched his chest, and she even thought of the first time she saw Sang Yan come out of the shower without clothes. Thinking of all this, Wen Yifan became even more devastated. Did he think of her as some kind of temptress? If she kept being so forward with him, would he lose interest in her? These questions flashed through her mind one after another. Thinking of all this, Wen Yifan was at a loss and even more regretful about what she had done to him during this time. But what she did not know was that Sang Yan was already enjoying it all, because all of this was what he had wanted. From then on, Wen Yifan pursued Sang Yan even more boldly. One evening, when Wen Yifan returned home, she saw Sang Yan playing a game. To take the initiative to get closer to him, the next day at work, she downloaded the game Sang Yan was playing. Her colleague, watching Wen Yifan play the game by herself, was very frustrated. "You haven't even caught the guy yet, and you're already playing the game alone. If you want to pursue him, you have to play with him. That way, it creates a sense of superiority in him, and you can get closer to him." At this moment, on the other side, Sang Yan was having dinner with his colleagues. Facing his recent unusual behavior, his colleagues were very curious. Watching everyone's heated discussion, Sang Yan directly said something that made them all envious. "She wants to pursue me. What can I do? Just wait to be pursued." And so time quickly came to the evening. Wen Yifan was at home, desperately playing the game to level up. However, at that moment, she suddenly received a call from her mother, telling her that last time she had not known that her aunt was coming. Wen Yifan did not forgive this lie from her so-called mother, and directly hung up the phone. It was precisely this phone call from her mother that stirred Wen Yifan's emotions once again. When Sang Yan returned, he found that she was having another sleepwalking episode and had slept in Sang Yan's bed. Looking at the goddess he had secretly loved for 8 years lying on his bed, Sang Yan's eyes were full of affection. At that moment, Wen Yifan suddenly turned her head. Afraid of being discovered, Sang Yan secretly crouched down and looked at Wen Yifan, who was so close to him. At this moment, Sang Yan felt an indescribable sadness. He was afraid that Wen Yifan's recent enthusiastic pursuit of him was just an illusion. He was afraid that when he woke up, he would still be alone, secretly in love. But he still hoped that Wen Yifan would take the initiative with him one more time, to give him a little bit of confidence to believe in, so that he could rush forward without hesitation. Time quickly came to the next day. After waking up, Wen Yifan found herself in a room that was both unfamiliar and familiar, and she immediately became fully alert, realizing that she had sleepwalked again the night before. But she could not find Sang Yan anywhere. When she went to the living room, she found that Sang Yan had slept on the sofa the night before. She quickly woke him up and asked if she had sleepwalked again, and why he had not woken her up. Unexpectedly, Sang Yan directly retorted, "I don't have that ability. You're capable of anything to take advantage of me." Wen Yifan retorted, "If I really wanted to take advantage of you, would you lock the door?" Just as Wen Yifan said this, before Sang Yan could react, she sat directly on his lap, placing both hands on his shoulders. This move immediately made Sang Yan uneasy. Wen Yifan told him that if he did not lock the door, this would be the situation. Hearing Wen Yifan's words, Sang Yan seemed to have found that feeling from before. Just as he was about to lean in for a kiss, Wen Yifan shyly quickly ran away. Seeing the person he loved about to leave, Sang Yan quickly reached out and grabbed her hand. Before Wen Yifan could react, he pulled her into his arms. Facing this sudden intimate contact, Wen Yifan was at a loss. Looking at Sang Yan slowly approaching her, she was still a little shy at this moment and found an excuse to quickly escape this shy-making scene. Watching Wen Yifan run away, Sang Yan could no longer suppress the joy at the corners of his mouth. Time passed like this, and Sang Yan's birthday went from 40-something days away to just 15 days left. That evening, Wen Yifan saw Sang Yan playing games on the sofa and deliberately approached him, wanting to invite him to dinner on Friday. Hearing Wen Yifan invite him to dinner, Sang Yan's eyes lit up and he immediately perked up. After they made the plan and were about to go back to their rooms, Wen Yifan turned back and said she would remind him again on Friday. Soon, Friday arrived. Wen Yifan had chosen her clothes carefully, not only putting on beautiful makeup, but also using the perfume Sang Yan had given her for his birthday. However, to their surprise, when they arrived at the restaurant they had booked, they happened to run into Sang Yan's colleagues also having a gathering there. Their first date was ruined by Sang Yan's colleagues. After returning from their date, Wen Yifan received an emergency call from the television station. There had been a mudslide in Bayou, and they needed to go there to cover it. In order to get first-hand coverage, while packing her things, she saw the date she had marked on her calendar, Sang Yan's birthday. She did not know if she could make it back in time to celebrate his birthday. At this moment, Sang Yan suddenly said, "I have something to tell you." Watching Sang Yan leave, Wen Yifan was at a loss. She did not understand what Sang Yan wanted to say to her. Soon, Wen Yifan and her television station arrived in Bayou to report on the disaster situation. Watching the injured people being rescued, Wen Yifan felt an indescribable feeling in her heart. Human life was so fragile. Exhausted, she returned to the hotel, and the only thing that gave her strength was reporting her safety to Sang Yan. Hearing Sang Yan's voice also gave her some comfort, and she thought in her heart that she hoped to make it back for his birthday. To make up for the lost opportunity, she specially drew an apple for him. Time passed like this for 6 days. She thought the work would end there, but unexpectedly there was another setback. Due to follow-up reports, she had to stay one more day. When her work was finished, she returned to Baikang High School, where she had once studied. Looking at the familiar scenes, it seemed as if at this moment she could see the time when she and Sang Yan had spent together. In the blink of an eye, when Yifan arrived at that familiar place again, the noodle shop where she and Sang Yan used to go often. It seemed that nothing had changed. Even the boss was still the same boss. Only the passers-by had changed. Watching the heavy rain outside, when Yifan once again remembered the day she had broken up with Sang Yan. It had also been such a rainy day, except that Sang Yan's face had worn an expression she had never seen before. At this moment, she also understood one thing. Sang Yan deserved all the good things in the world. So she made an important decision. She picked up her phone and called Sang Yan, asking him if what he had said before still counted. Sang Yan asked what she meant. When Yifan said, "You said that if I pursued you, you would consider it. I'm just giving you a heads up about the situation. You can think it over." When Yifan had finally confessed to Sang Yan, though she was still a little shy. Just as she finished eating and was sitting there waiting for the rain to stop, at that moment, Sang Yan suddenly appeared in front of her. Seeing Sang Yan appear before her, when Yifan felt so warm, he had always been by her side. Everything was unspoken. At this moment, they remembered the scene of eating here before. Back then, when Yifan had always hoped that one day when she had money, she would open a shop where people who worked overtime could bring their children and work while taking care of them without being disturbed by anyone. The two of them, one busy cooking in the kitchen, the other handling the front of house customers. The scene was so warm. At this moment, Sang Yan also knew her feelings. He no longer cared about Wen Yifan's pursuit and spoke the words he had kept in his heart all these years. "After all these years, I still only like you, Wen Yifan." Hearing Sang Yan's words and remembering the breakup on that rainy day, it seemed that at this moment they had found their way back to the starting point. Wen Yifan became even more certain of her answer. Looking at Sang Yan in front of her, she also gathered her courage and said, "If you think saying these things is too cheesy, then I'll say them from now on. You are now my partner." In fact, the moment Sang Yan received Wen Yifan's confession text, he had already bought a train ticket to Bayou, just so he could find his beloved Wen Yifan as soon as possible. Since Wen Yifan was sharing a room with a colleague during this business trip, she could only book a room on the same floor for Sang Yan. Just as she was seeing him to the door of his room, Sang Yan started playing tricks. He deliberately let Wen Yifan into his room, then stood quietly behind her under the pretext of asking her to help him find his phone. At that moment, Wen Yifan, unaware of what was happening, turned around and brought her body close to Sang Yan's face, who had already schemed against her. Looking at Sang Yan's actions in front of her, Wen Yifan was at a loss, shyly stepped back 2 paces, and nervously touched her lips that Sang Yan had just kissed. Seeing that his scheme had succeeded, Sang Yan then took out his phone from his pants pocket, saying that the phone was here, no need to look for it. This thoroughly embarrassed Wen Yifan, who quickly used washing an apple as an excuse to leave and calm down, leaving Sang Yan, whose heart was already blooming, unable to suppress the joy at the corners of his mouth. At this moment, Wen Yifan, washing the apple in the bathroom, remembered Sang Yan's confession to her in the noodle shop that evening, and the scene of Sang Yan kissing her just now. Thinking of this, her face instantly became red and hot. Just then, Sang Yan's takeout order arrived. Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan lowered her head and smiled shyly. The air was filled with the disgusting smell of love, so enviable. When leaving after the meal, Sang Yan deliberately teased Wen Yifan. This was also the happiest gift he had received on his birthday after so many years of waiting, that Wen Yifan had finally officially become his girlfriend. After returning to her room, Wen Yifan received a message from her best friend Kaio, telling her that Sang Yan had just posted on his moments and announced that he had a girlfriend. At this moment, Kaio was full of questions. She still did not know that the person Sang Yan announced as his girlfriend was her best friend Wen Yifan. Kaio was indignant on Wen Yifan's behalf, glad that Wen Yifan had not gotten involved with Sang Yan. At this moment, Wen Yifan, seeing Sang Yan's post, realized that he had already received the birthday cake she had sent. She then sent a message to Kaio telling her that she was the one Sang Yan had announced as his girlfriend. Seeing this news, Kaio was stunned and sent several question marks in a row. She never expected that it wasn't that Sang Yan had hidden it from her, but that Sang Yan and her best friend had hidden it from her together. Time quickly came to the next day. The two of them quickly returned to their shared rental in Namo. Wen Yifan also took out the birthday gift she had prepared for Sang Yan. Looking at the man she liked in front of her, Wen Yifan still felt a little shy. Just as Sang Yan had changed his clothes, he noticed that Wen Yifan's ear was injured. He quickly went to find the first aid kit to apply medicine for her. Wen Yifan, seeing Sang Yan's unsmiling face, thought he was angry. Just as Sang Yan approached with the medicine, Wen Yifan remembered the first time Sang Yan had saved her when she was injured. He had also been this close, wiping the wounds on her body. However, just as everything was done and she was about to return to her room, Sang Yan suddenly spoke, telling her to find him tomorrow after she woke up. Wen Yifan asked if it would be too fast. Sang Yan asked, "What are you thinking about? I meant applying medicine for you." Hearing this, Wen Yifan shyly quickly ran back to her room, leaving Sang Yan, whose heart was already blooming with joy, not knowing how to smile foolishly. Time quickly came to the next day. To announce that his girlfriend was Wen Yifan, he deliberately brought her to his restaurant. However, his colleagues chattered on, and not a single one guessed that the couple sitting across from them was Sang Yan and Wen Yifan. Faced with these clueless people, Sang Yan could only take Wen Yifan and leave first. Later, while they were shopping in the mall, Sang Yan suddenly heard a passing couple say that if you kiss at the highest point of the Ferris wheel, the two of you will be together forever. Looking at Wen Yifan walking ahead, Sang Yan did not want to miss this opportunity. He wanted to ride the Ferris wheel again. Looking at Wen Yifan beside him, it seemed that at this moment they were both satisfied. The entire Ferris wheel was filled with the hormones of love. After taking a photo together before Wen Yifan could react, Sang Yan stood up, hugged her, and kissed her. This disgusting smell of love made my heart bloom in front of the screen. At this moment, Wen Yifan was already extremely shy inside, her eyes darting around and her hands shyly moving about. Time passed quickly and they returned home. Just as Wen Yifan went to the refrigerator to get some water, Sang Yan followed her. Seeing Sang Yan approaching her, Wen Yifan thought he was going to kiss her again. But the next second, Sang Yan opened the refrigerator. Watching Wen Yifan walk away, Sang Yan, drinking water at the corner of his mouth, could not suppress the upward curve of his lips. After returning to her room, Wen Yifan looked at everyone's concern for her. She was happy. Not only was she loved by Sang Yan, but she also had a group of good friends. Looking at the first photo of her, and Sang Yan on the Ferris wheel on her phone, Wen Yifan smiled so sweetly at this moment. The scenes of their time together instantly appeared in her mind. Just as she was fantasizing about everything that had just happened with Sang Yan and the happy life to come, at that moment, she suddenly received a message with a photo taken at a hospital in Bayu. Looking at the photo of herself, she suddenly became alert. Looking at the photo that had been taken, she also remembered at this moment that someone had called her name at the hospital before, so she fearfully called the number. The moment she heard the voice on the other end, Wen Yifan finally confirmed that this person was exactly the villain who had violated her before. It was truly sweetness mixed with sorrow. Wen Yifan never expected that at the very moment she had just begun to feel happiness, such an unwelcome visitor would appear. To avoid thinking about what had happened before, she deleted the message the next day, because Wen Yifan knew she could not be troubled by these things. As the saying goes, to catch a man, you must first catch his stomach. After tidying up the room, she began to cook a lavish dinner for Sang Yan. Watching Sang Yan eat so happily, Wen Yifan suddenly started crying. Seeing Wen Yifan crying, Sang Yan finally said the words he had always wanted to say to her. "No matter what happens, I will catch you." Looking at Sang Yan in front of her, Wen Yifan was very moved because he had always been by her side. Soon they finished eating. Just as they were watching a movie together, Wen Yifan suddenly received a message from her stepfather's daughter, telling her that her relatives and aunt were at her house, refusing to leave, and even asking her mother for money to buy a house for her cousin's wedding. Sang Yan noticed something was wrong with Wen Yifan and deliberately asked her, after she finished reading the message, if she wanted to go home. When Wen Yifan said she would not go home for the new year, he also started counting the days. Looking at the serious Sang Yan beside her, Wen Yifan suddenly remembered the scene of him deliberately coming back on New Year's Eve last year. At this moment, a smile finally appeared on her face. Then Wen Yifan also told Sang Yan why she did not go home. It was because after her father passed away, Her mother remarried and could not get along with the daughter of her stepfather's family, so she eventually returned to her grandmother's house. But soon after, her grandmother passed away, and she had to stay with her aunt's family. Looking at the sad Wen Yifan, Sang Yan directly pulled her into his arms. Facing this warm embrace, Sang Yan finally let go of all her defenses and lay quietly in his arms. Sang Yan said, "Everything in this room was chosen for you. You deserve the best of everything." Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan was happy at this moment because she finally experienced the feeling of being loved and cherished. Due to their work schedules, Sang Yan would come back at 2 or 3 in the morning every day. Wen Yifan went to bed early and woke up early, resulting in them not seeing each other for several days. Looking at the empty room, Wen Yifan felt a little disappointed. That evening, just as Wen Yifan was sleeping, she suddenly received a call from the television station asking her to go downstairs immediately to report on a scene. Just as she was packing up and about to leave, she ran into Sang Yan, who had just returned from overtime. They had not seen each other for several days. Faced with this sudden situation, Wen Yifan could only hug him briefly and quickly leave. However, when she arrived at the accident scene and was about to start reporting, she discovered something terrifying. Looking at the injured perpetrator being carried out by the firefighters, Wen Yifan froze. The taxi driver was none other than the person who had violated her before. To avoid being discovered by him, Wen Yifan could only hide fearfully in the corner of the car. She was afraid to see the person who had hurt her because she did not want to have anything to do with those people anymore. She then returned home and happened to see Sang Yan, who had not rested yet, making porridge for her. Looking at Sang Yan in front of her, Wen Yifan made an important decision at this moment. In the past, when she graduated, she chose to give up Sang Yan to protect him from harm. This time, she absolutely would not let go, because she knew that Sang Yan deserved all the good things she could give him. Wen Yifan said, "I want to kiss you." Hearing these words, Sang Yan was stunned. Before he could react, Wen Yifan took the initiative and kissed him. However, before he could savor the sweetness, the shy Wen Yifan quickly turned and left. At this moment, Sang Yan directly called her back. Then he walked in front of her and began to tease Wen Yifan. His life was too hard. Early in the morning, his girlfriend would start teasing him with a kiss but not do it properly, and it wasn't even the first time. Hearing this, Wen Yifan became completely shy. Sang Yan told her that if she wanted to flirt, could she be more serious? Just as Wen Yifan stood on her tiptoes, Sang Yan kissed her directly. The two of them became entangled in the kitchen. Faced with this sudden kiss and teasing, Wen Yifan was still a little shy and at a loss, clinging tightly to Sang Yan. However, Sang Yan still did not intend to let her go. Looking at the shy Wen Yifan beside him, he continued to tease her, asking if she wanted to drink porridge or continue kissing. Wen Yifan shyly said she was hungry and quickly drank the porridge, barely calming herself down. While eating breakfast, Sang Yan teased Wen Yifan again, saying her kissing skills were terrible. Before Wen Yifan could explain, Sang Yan kissed her back. After returning to her room, she remembered Sang Yan kissing her while they were drinking porridge and saying her kissing skills were too poor. So she began to practice the motion of kissing, pursing her lips, closing her eyes, and practicing in front of the mirror. After several attempts, she finally gave up. Just then, she saw the Valentine's Day gift she had prepared for Sang Yan, so she took the gift and shyly went to his room, giving him the gift she had prepared. The snowflake represented herself, Xiunjiang, and that mulberry leaf represented Sang Yan. Looking at Wen Yifan in the sunlight, Sang Yan was so happy at this moment. Wen Yifan also experienced the feeling of being loved at this moment, because she had missed Sang Yan during her college years, and deeply regretted not being able to participate in that part of his life. If she could, Wen Yifan would not want to miss any of his future joys and sorrows. She wanted to walk with Sang Yan like this forever. The next day, Wen Yifan accompanied Sang Yan to a colleague's wedding. The colleague teased that Wen Yifan was the girl Sang Yan said was crazy to pursue him. Wen Yifan said it was not pursue, but chase. Hearing Wen Yifan's words, the colleagues were shocked. They never expected that the person who had once joked about pursuing Sang Yan was actually Wen Yifan. Looking at Wen Yifan in front of him, Sang Yan was content. Happiness came so suddenly. Soon after attending the friend's wedding, a very drunk Wen Yifan started acting out, blaming Sang Yan for smiling at all the girls all night and adding them on WeChat. Sang Yan directly took out his phone and said, "Look and see if I actually added anyone." Fortunately, a taxi arrived at that moment. After much coaxing from Sang Yan, he finally managed to get her into the car. Soon they returned to their building. Looking at Wen Yifan, who was completely drunk, Sang Yan could only carry her on his back. At that moment, Wen Yifan, drunk, spoke about what had happened in Yis. She had worked desperately hard to get into the newspaper, and although she successfully joined, people said she had used her looks to seduce the newspaper director to get in. Listening to what Wen Yifan said, Sang Yan felt great pain at this moment. He had not realized that so many things had happened to Wen Yifan in places he could not see. Just as Sang Yan was reflecting on whether he had done enough, Wen Yifan suddenly told him that she had once dreamed that he had brought his wife to Yi on their honeymoon trip, and when he saw her, he even smiled at her. Hearing this, Sang Yan looked both distressed and helpless, telling Wen Yifan that in the future he would take her to Yi for a trip together. Then, lying on Sang Yan's lap, she continued to tell him that she did not like Bayu and did not like Yi either, because there was no one there worth her attachment, and no one liked her there. At least in Namo, her father's grave was here. Sang Yan just quietly watched Wen Yifan lying on the floor, but at this moment, he still did not know that Wen Yifan was not only in Namo because her father's grave was here, but also because of the person she had always wanted to see but dared not, and that person was Sang Yan. Because during the wedding that evening, Wen Yifan had heard Sang Yan's classmate tell her that the time Sang Yan had been drinking, and kept saying he was the one who had been dumped. At this moment, Wen Yifan finally realized how much she had wronged Sang Yan. Soon after, Sang Yan finally got Wen Yifan back into the house. Unexpectedly at that moment, Wen Yifan became very resistant. Sang Yan looked at her with great affection. The drunk Wen Yifan looked at Sang Yan in front of her and said seriously, "Outrageous and heinous." Hearing this, Sang Yan was thoroughly annoyed. Looking at the completely drunk Wen Yifan, Sang Yan was very frustrated. He had thought that tonight, since she had drunk so much, someone would take care of him, but in the end, he ended up taking care of her. However, what Sang Yan did not expect was that just as he was about to pull Wen Yifan back to rest, she started acting up again, asking if he could help her take a shower. Sang Yan said he could not. Hearing Sang Yan's answer, the dazed Wen Yifan turned around, touched Sang Yan's chest, and said coquettishly that she could help him take a bath in the future. This was too thrilling, and it was Wen Yifan who had said it. Before Sang Yan could react, Wen Yifan hugged him again, saying, "I'll sleep with you." Facing this unreasonable Wen Yifan, Sang Yan's eyes were full of tenderness. He quickly got up, carried her from the sofa, and finally managed to get her back to her own room. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Wen Yifan apologizing to him again. Hearing her drunken words, Sang Yan felt a mixture of confusion and heartache, so he slept by her bedside, quietly watching over her. However, the next morning, when Sang Yan woke up, he found Wen Yifan hugging him directly. This scared him so much that he did not know what to do. After waking up, Wen Yifan was also confused, thinking she had sleepwalked again. She then looked at her clothes and stammered, asking who had changed them. Upon learning that she had washed them herself, her expression relaxed. However, Wen Yifan did not know that the night before, Sang Yan had taken her to the bathroom and served as her makeup remover model. Happiness had become concrete in that moment, but happiness came quickly, and tragedy came quickly too. The villain who had violated her before found her again. Looking at the villain in front of her, Wen Yifan was full of fear. Although Sang Yan could protect her sometimes, when she was alone, the villain still found an opportunity to threaten her. Just as she was being forced back step by the villain, Sang Yan arrived just in time. Fortunately, with the help of Sang Yan and his colleagues, the villain barely left, but as he left, he still threatened her with a smile. However, it was precisely because of what happened that evening that Sang Yan had nightmares after going to sleep. After waking up, he could not calm down. Just as he was about to check on Wen Yifan's room, he found the door suddenly open and saw Wen Yifan walking to the wall, looking at the clock on the wall. Seeing Wen Yifan's actions, Sang Yan could not figure out why this was happening. However, at that moment, seeing that Wen Yifan was about to hit the corner of the table, Sang Yan quickly ran over and asked, "Aren't you scared being alone in the living room?" Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan, who was sleepwalking, seemed to have a spiritual connection, and tears began to flow from the corners of her eyes. Sang Yan saw all of this. However, just as he was about to get a napkin to wipe away Wen Yifan's tears, she suddenly grabbed his hand and under Sang Yan's surprised gaze, silently led him back to her room. Sang Yan followed her with a heart full of pain the whole way. Looking at Wen Yifan, who was still crying while sleepwalking in front of him, Sang Yan felt an indescribable sadness and heartache. Sang Yan stayed by Wen Yifan's side and slept beside her, feeling that this would give her some peace of mind. However, the next morning, when Wen Yifan woke up and found Sang Yan lying beside her, and then looked around the room to confirm it was her bedroom, seeing Wen Yifan's dismissive expression, Sang Yan teased her. However, what Wen Yifan never expected still happened. When she went to work in the morning, she met the villain again in the elevator. She never thought he would find her here. Looking at the villain opposite her, Wen Yifan was full of fear. But that evening on her way home from work, she was forcefully grabbed from behind by the villain again. Faced with his threatening words, Wen Yifan was terrified to the extreme. Fortunately, her colleagues arrived just in time, preventing the villain from doing anything more excessive. It was precisely because he had found Wen Yifan and investigated the address of the bar run by Sang Yan that, to take revenge on Wen Yifan and send her to prison, he conspired with others to maliciously file a food safety complaint against Sang Yan's bar. Meanwhile, on the other side, Wen Yifan learned from Cairo that Sang Yan's bar had been complained about. Seeing the overwhelming coverage online, she thought of one person. It must have been the villain's doing. Otherwise, Sang Yan's bar would not have been reported so out of nowhere. To prevent Sang Yan from being hurt further, she gathered her courage and went to her mother's house again, a place that made her nauseous and that she utterly despised. Seeing her aunt and the so-called uncle there, she stated the situation without any politeness. Faced with Wen Yifan's questioning, her aunt tried to retort, but at this moment, Wen Yifan, who only wanted to protect Sang Yan, had no connection with them anymore and directly retorted, saying that if they came to harass her or the people around her again, she would definitely call the police immediately. When she heard her mother still arrogantly speaking ill of Sang Yan, Wen Yifan did not hold back and retorted again. Turning around, Sang Yan saw Wen Yifan, who had come home temporarily, and his eyes were full of heartache. At this moment, Wen Yifan, to prevent him from noticing, could only choose to hold him tightly, using Sang Yan's clothes to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes. It seemed that at this moment, Sang Yan noticed something was wrong with Wen Yifan. Just as he was about to ask what had happened, Wen Yifan pretended that nothing was wrong and leaned on him. Wen Yifan did not want him to see her worries and chose to bear everything alone. After returning to her room, she could no longer control herself and cried, remembering the villain's threatening words and Sang Yan's confession to her. Thinking of all this, Wen Yifan could only choose to bear everything silently. Time quickly came to the next day. Because Sang Yan learned that his sister had been dating an older boyfriend in Yi, his parents were worried, so Sang Yan had to go there first to check on things. After Wen Yifan saw Sang Yan off and returned home, looking at the house they had shared, she felt happy at this moment, because only here was her home, a place with memories of her life with Sang Yan, with the protective padding Sang Yan had thoughtfully installed to prevent her from bumping into things while sleepwalking, and with Sang Yan's care for her at every moment. At this moment she also remembered the villain's threat, that no matter where she fled, he would find her. Facing this threat, Wen Yifan could no longer control herself and cried. To avoid affecting Sang Yan's life, she could only choose to leave Namo alone. When Sang Yan returned and saw that the room had been cleaned out, he could no longer sit still. He could not believe that Wen Yifan would leave without a word. There must be something she was hiding from him. At that moment, he found a letter in the corner. Reading the letter that told him not to look for her, Sang Yan completely lost his mind and searched for her everywhere. His first stop was the police station. However, to his surprise, after the police investigated, they learned that her mother had quarreled with her a few days earlier. Hearing this news, Sang Yan remembered the scene a few days earlier when Wen Yifan had come home soaking wet and held him crying. However, when he heard that her mother was not in a hurry to look for her, Sang Yan sensed something was wrong. Wen Yifan must be hiding something. So he began to search for her among the vast sea of people. He not only went to Wen Yifan's grandmother's house, but also visited Yin University, where she had studied, and even went to her former workplace. But he could not find Wen Yifan anywhere. Faced with this situation, Sang Yan could not believe that Wen Yifan had left him so quietly. He then went to the home of Wen Yifan's aunt, where she had lived during high school. Looking at the cramped space in the room, with only one corner that could fit a bed, he could not imagine that Wen Yifan had once lived in such a place. All the scenes from the past now converged in Sang Yan's mind. Looking at the study materials on the desk with the goal written as Namo University, he could only leave in disappointment. He then returned to Namo. Just as he was about to go to her mother's house, Sang Yan spotted the villain who had grabbed Wen Yifan at the restaurant before. He followed him all the way to the company building. At that moment, the villain also discovered that Sang Yan was following him and directly taunted him. Faced with the villain's provocation, Sang Yan could no longer control himself and drove his car directly toward him, but he still did not commit a crime. At this moment, Wen Yifan, who had fled to Hong Kong, watched the rain outside and seemed unable to move on. She wandered aimlessly on the streets every day, watching the prosperity of Hong Kong. To make a living, she chose to work as a small laborer in Hong Kong, working as a greeter at a restaurant, even washing dishes. That evening, as she was watching the lights by the seaside, she suddenly noticed Xiang Lang looking at her. To avoid being seen, she quickly disappeared into the crowd while Xiang Lang was not paying attention. Meanwhile, Sang Yan in Namo spent every day listlessly. He wanted to find Wen Yifan and ask what had happened. He wanted to bear everything for Wen Yifan. That day, when he saw the villain coming to his restaurant, flirting with other girls, Sang Yan could no longer control himself. He pulled the villain into a corner and beat him up without regard for the consequences. He wanted to use this method to make those who had bullied Wen Yifan stay far away from her, to make them never appear before her again. Soon after, Sang Yan learned from Xiang Lang that Wen Yifan was now in Hong Kong and seemed to have some troubles. Xiang Lang thought he had wronged Wen Yifan, which was why she had fled. When Sang Yan said that nothing had happened between them, Xiang Lang also told him some rumors he had heard from Cairo about things that had happened to Wen Yifan in high school, seemingly related to her aunt's family, and that she had not lived well. To find Wen Yifan's whereabouts, Sang Yan boarded a plane to Hong Kong. Persistence paid off, and he did find the apartment where Wen Yifan had once lived. But when he arrived, Wen Yifan had already moved out. Looking at the empty room, scenes of Wen Yifan living there played out in his mind. However, no matter how he searched, he ultimately could not find her. But while he was eating, Sang Yan did not notice Wen Yifan walking behind him. The two of them thus disappeared from each other's world. Helpless, he could only return to Namo. Cairo, hearing that he had gone to Hong Kong and not found Wen Yifan, then went to Su Heion's grandparents, who had lived in Hong Kong for a period of time. But in the end, they still could not find any news about Wen Yifan. At this moment in Hong Kong, Wen Yifan had also started to find work for herself again. Because she had once interviewed a girl who danced, she went back to that dance studio. She wanted to change to a place of escape, as if being there could make her forget many painful memories. Meanwhile, on the other side, Cairo, seeing Sang Yan so anxious, went to Hong Kong with Su Heion to search first, because they had received word that there seemed to be news about Wen Yifan at a university. So the two quickly arrived in Hong Kong and began asking students on campus whether they knew a person named Wen Yifan. Just as they were about to give up in despair, they suddenly saw Wen Yifan appear before them. Seeing Cairo hug her excitedly, Wen Yifan was very surprised. She had not expected that even after hiding here, they would still find her. After some brief small talk, Wen Yifan returned to her small rental room and took out her old phone. After turning it on, she saw so many messages from Sang Yan. At that moment, she also saw the threatening message from Qi Zind, saying that no matter where she fled, he would find her. Facing this threat, Wen Yifan no longer chose to retreat. She warned Qi Zind that she would make him pay the price he deserved. Then she called Sang Yan. At this moment on the other side, when Sang Yan saw the incoming call from Wen Yifan, he was extremely excited. "Are you okay?" Hearing Wen Yifan's voice, his whole body trembled because he knew that Wen Yifan would not leave him so quietly. Soon after, Sang Yan finally found his beloved Wen Yifan at a small theater in Hong Kong. Looking at her in front of him, Sang Yan was indescribably happy and held her tightly in his arms, happy that he had found her again, happy that Wen Yifan had finally contacted him, happy that he had finally received Wen Yifan's approval. When he heard the reasons she had given for avoiding him, Sang Yan's eyes were full of heartache. He told Wen Yifan not to pay attention to those things and not to think about them, because she deserved to stand alone in the sunlight and bloom. Hearing Sang Yan's words, Wen Yifan finally let go of her burdens at this moment. It turned out that Wen Yifan had such a painful past. After her father passed away, her mother remarried, and she ended up living with her aunt's family. However, she could only stay in a cluttered storage room. But for the homeless Wen Yifan, none of that mattered. What she never expected was that while living in her aunt's house, she caught the attention of her aunt's younger brother, Qi Zind. Because Wen Yifan was good-looking, Qi Zind developed predatory intentions toward her. Every night, under the pretext of tutoring her, he would come to her room to get close to her body. Even when her aunt was not at home, he would deliberately make her stand in a corner and prepare to violate her under the pretext of looking for something. But what she never imagined was that her aunt did nothing to stop her brother's behavior. She chose to turn a blind eye. Fortunately, Sang Yan's company helped her get through that difficult time in high school. On the night after the college entrance examination ended, Qi Zind took advantage of Wen Yifan's sleep, used the key to enter her room, and prepared to violate her. Wen Yifan struggled desperately. Just as she was trying to escape, she accidentally fell from the window. Soon, the police arrived, and Wen Yifan directly sent him to prison. But when she saw her mother and aunt, they said he had simply entered the wrong room and tried to cover it up. Even her mother chose to side with her aunt. At this moment, Wen Yifan's heart was shattered. She could not understand why her mother did not believe her but believed others instead. Watching her mother turn and walk away, Wen Yifan reached the lowest point of despair at that moment. After that, she completely left Beiyu and chose a university where no one knew her. Now, back in the present, Wen Yifan looked at Sang Yan and finally let go of her burdens. At that moment, she suddenly noticed the wound on Sang Yan's lip. To prevent Wen Yifan from knowing that he had beaten up Qi Zind, Sang Yan lied that he had fallen. Just as Wen Yifan moved closer to check, the two looked into each other's eyes, and the atmosphere instantly became warm and romantic. Sang Yan did not hold back and directly kissed Wen Yifan. It seemed that at this moment their longing for each other had reached its peak. Unexpectedly, at the critical moment, Sang Yan suddenly stopped. This left Wen Yifan beside him a little confused. Why did he stop? At this moment, Sang Yan looked at the shy Wen Yifan and teased her with a mischievous smile. Seeing Sang Yan's actions, Wen Yifan became completely flustered. Seeing the atmosphere was right, Sang Yan did not hold back and went for it directly. The two quickly intertwined, expressing their mutual longing. Time passed quickly. The next morning upon waking, looking at the marks left on her neck from the night before, Wen Yifan was happy but also pained. After all, only she had them, so she insisted on putting a mark on Sang Yan too. Soon they returned from Hong Kong to Namo. The issue at hand was quite clear. Wen Yifan had resigned from the television station and wanted to apply again. Sang Yan fully supported Wen Yifan's decision. After Wen Yifan returned to the television station, she received a new assignment and came to Beiyu to report on a case about a murdered woman. The murdered woman was her first friend from middle school, Lingling. The person who reported it was Zheng Yi, the daughter-in-law of Wen Yifan's aunt. From Zheng Yi, she learned that Qi Zind had tried to commit indecent acts against her while she was washing up, and fortunately, her aunt had returned in time to stop Qi Zind's behavior. She had thought her aunt would teach her brother a lesson, but to Zheng Yi's surprise, during their conversation, she overheard a huge secret. The murdered woman Lingling was Qi Zind's doing. At that moment, Zheng Yi realized she had married into a family of murderers. When Yifan listened to her painful memories, her eyes full of sympathy. She felt for what Zheng Yi had gone through the night before, but she was also certain that Zheng Yi had made a brave decision. Because Qi Zind had escaped, the police had not caught him. That evening, while chatting with Sang Yan, he told her about this business trip to Beiyu. Now that Qi Zind was in trouble, he would most likely go to Namo, so she reminded Sang Yan to be very careful when going to and from work. The case regarding Qi Zind in Beiyu was basically clear, and they no longer needed to report on it. They just had to wait for the official announcement. Time passed quickly, and Wen Yifan and her team returned to Namo. That evening, when Sang Yan came to the downstairs of Wen Yifan's television station, he suddenly spotted Qi Zind lurking suspiciously at the entrance. He immediately felt something was wrong. This person must be here for Wen Yifan. To prevent him from finding Wen Yifan, Sang Yan did not care whether he had a weapon or not and charged directly at him. The two quickly started fighting, but no matter how much Sang Yan calculated, he did not expect that Qi Zind, desperate and cornered, would pull out a dagger and stab him directly. At that moment, Wen Yifan upstairs was still thinking of calling Sang Yan to ask where he was. However, when she heard the person on the other end say that the phone's owner was injured, Wen Yifan could no longer stay calm. She rushed downstairs and saw the blood-stained cloth on the ground and heard bystanders describing the injured person. At this moment, Wen Yifan could no longer control herself and became extremely anxious. The thing she had feared most had finally happened. Wen Yifan did not want Sang Yan to take risks. The reason she had left a few years ago was not to escape, but because she did not want her own problems to affect the only person she cared about, including her departure 6 months ago. Soon arriving at the hospital and seeing the injured Sang Yan, tears flowed uncontrollably. Wen Yifan could no longer hold back and scolded him. At this moment, Sang Yan, looking at Wen Yifan who was worried about him, knew that he had done the right thing this time. He had finally been able to protect Wen Yifan properly and keep her from being harmed again. Qi Zind and Wen Yifan's aunt ultimately received the punishment they deserved. However, after returning home, Wen Yifan was afraid that Sang Yan would get his wound wet while showering, so she volunteered to help him wash. This outrageous act made the atmosphere in the entire bathroom instantly warm and romantic. As time passed, Sang Yan and Wen Yifan finally ended their 2-year cohabitation. While packing their things to move, Wen Yifan found a worn-out iron box in Sang Yan's suitcase. When she opened it, she not only found her graduation photos, but also all the train and plane tickets to Namo, large and small, and even all the articles she had published in the Namo Daily. Seeing this scene, Wen Yifan could no longer control herself and cried. She never imagined that Sang Yan had always been paying attention to her, had always been living in every corner of her life, yet she had never noticed. At this moment, Sang Yan, watching Wen Yifan cry, teasingly provoked her. Wen Yifan told Sang Yan that she would love him for 6 more years, to make up for all the days she had been away, to make up for the time she had owed him. Facing Wen Yifan's sudden confession, Sang Yan was indescribably excited. After so many years of waiting, it had finally come to a perfect ending. The two held each other tightly, neither wanting to be separated. However, what Wen Yifan never expected was that, when they moved into Sang Yan's newly renovated house, she found that the door password was neither her birthday, nor Sang Yan's own birthday. Upon asking, she learned that Sang Yan had set the password to the day they first met. Hearing this, Wen Yifan's heart was already filled with unspeakable love. Looking at the furniture in the house, which was still her favorite style, she finally had her own space at this moment, a real home that truly belonged to her. Soon after, Sang Yan also took her to meet his parents. Seeing the harmonious family atmosphere, it was the kind of family environment she had longed for since her father's death. Even during the New Year's Eve dinner, Sang Yan's mother specially prepared a red envelope for her, saying that they were now family. Hearing Sang Yan's mother's words, Wen Yifan finally felt the feeling of being cared for and cherished by family. Watching their family laughing and talking, Wen Yifan felt so happy inside. After the meal, she learned from Sang Zhai that after the college entrance examination ended on the day when Yifan broke up with him, Sang Yan had been completely devastated and lay at home every day. No matter how she, as his sister, took care of him, he just would not eat anything. But it was precisely because she saw her brother's heartbreak that she told him a fairy tale, which helped Sang Yan regain his spirits. However, what Wen Yifan did not know was that on the day she first came to the restaurant, which was also the day before she was about to leave Namo, at that very moment, Sang Yan had once again seen Wen Yifan, whom he had been waiting for. Soon after, Sang Yan brought Wen Yifan back to their former high school. Looking at the familiar scenes, Sang Yan still stood in the crowd like before, but this time he called out the name, Wen Xiunjiang. Hearing Sang Yan call her, it seemed they had returned to the time of their first meeting. Then Sang Yan took Wen Yifan's hand and happily walked through every corner of the school. At this moment, Sang Yan suggested going to their old classroom. The moment they stepped through the classroom door, the scene of being scolded by the teacher for being late for the first time reappeared before them. It seemed that nothing had changed, yet something had. Looking at Wen Yifan lying beside him, Sang Yan's eyes were full of affection. However, just as they were leisurely enjoying the sunshine, the scenes they had experienced together reappeared in their dreams. It seemed that all of this had become smoke and clouds of the past. These were the experiences of their 3 years in high school, with happiness, with pain, and with each other's company. It seemed that this was not just smoke and clouds of the past, but the testimony of their journey together. Just then, the school bell suddenly rang. At this moment, Sang Yan directly walked up to the podium and pulled open the blackboard where his marriage proposal to Wen Yifan was written. Looking at everything Sang Yan had done for her tears had already wet the corners of her eyes. For this proposal, Sang Yan had specially prepared a video in advance, which included not only blessings from their former teachers, but also from their work colleagues, best friends, and even Sang Yan's parents. Looking at the nervous and flustered Sang Yan preparing to propose, Wen Yifan could no longer control herself. When facing the person you love, you just go all in. For Wen Yifan, who had grown up in a broken family, this happiness at this moment was something she had earned and deserved, and she deserved someone like Sang Yan to protect her. Her aunt and uncle could not escape the punishment of the law. Qi Zind was sentenced to death, and her aunt was sentenced to 3 years. Her mother did not turn out the way she had imagined, thinking that by abandoning her daughter she could find a good husband, but in the end, it was all in vain. Her husband found another woman. Looking at her mother, who was remorseful, Wen Yifan no longer had the cowardice she once had, because she knew that when she had been most helpless and needed her mother's help, her mother had chosen to turn a blind eye and not believe her. So this time, Wen Yifan hardened her heart and said goodbye to her mother, and would not contact her again. Lying behind Sang Yan, watching her mother walk away alone, Wen Yifan's heart still ached, because she knew that besides Sang Yan, no one loved her anymore. Then Sang Yan made a wish. Besides himself, there would be others who would love her. The story ends here. Thank you for watching this drama with Zaya Ashuai. We'll see you next time.